In this video, we're going to look at how to use the mobile VR inventory system. So it's a tutorial for this pack. I have the, the first thing you're going to want to do is import the pack. Here it is. Go to the documentation file, open that up. I got it open right here. So let's start with how to use, and it's starting off in a new scene. So the demo scene is going to help you out a lot for some of the more advanced parts of this pack. But for now, let's look at how to set up a basic scene. I'm going to say new scene, and we'll go back to the documentation that says from the hierarchy window, delete the main camera. So I'm going to do that. From the hierarchy window, select create UI mobile VR inventory, new VR inventory. So we're going to say create UI mobile VR inventory, new VR inventory. That creates the player, which includes the camera and all the required components, as well as the VR inventory, game object, and script. And it also brings in the event system. But before we're ready to use it, we're going to have to create an inventory item database somewhere in the assets folder by saying create mobile VR inventory, new inventory item database. So I'm going to go to the roots of the assets folder. I have one set up here. Let me delete that, and I'm going to start over. I'm going to say create mobile VR inventory, new inventory item database. And you can call this whatever you want. I'll call it new inventory item database. Now, one of the things that you're going to set up first is the outline. And you can see here how the outline works with the sword. When you look at it, you see the white outline. So I'm just going to stick with the default outline options, which is going to be that white outline as you see here. And then we're going to need to add an item into the database. So we do that by clicking add new. And we have to give it a name. So I'll call this small sword. And you can see here how to do the item configuration. I'll just go through that really quick. You need a sprite, so I'm going to select a sprite for the sword, whether or not it's equippable. And if it's equippable, then it needs to have a prefab, because the prefab is spawned, it's instantiated at runtime, and then it's destroyed when you put it away. So in order to do that, you need to have a prefab. The prefab for the sword from the demo is in the demo folder, equippable items, and there is the sword prefab. So if I go back to my inventory item database, and I'm going to click lock, and then come back to this equippable items. And so for the prefab for the sword, I've already made it. It's right here, and that's just has a 3D model of a sword on it. And so the stack size, how many of this is, so maybe if this item, if it's a health potion, it could take a stack size of 20, but this is a sword, so it's just going to be 1. And number of stacks, max number of stacks, this is the maximum number of stacks you can have in your inventory. So if you have health potions and the stack size is 20, and you say max number of stacks is 1, then the player could only pick up 20 potions, and he couldn't pick up 21 because he can only have 1 stack, and the stack size is 20, so that's stack size. For the sword, stack size is going to be 1, and the max number of stacks is going to be 1. You're just going to have 1 sword in the game. So pin in inventory, that lets you, if you set that, then the item will appear before any other non-pinned items in the inventory. So this will make the item appear in the first page, essentially, of the inventory. And then there's the sounds, pickup sound. The sound you play when you pick it up, the sound you play when multiple items are picked up. So the gold, the 5 gold coins model, when you pick that up, it might play a different, 5 coins sound than if you're picking up a single coin. So then the use sound, that's the audio clip to play when the item is used or selected in the inventory. And then we have the max pickup distance. I'll put that to 3. That's the distance in the scene that the player has to be in order to pick it up. So for the sword, you don't want to be all the way across the room and be able to pick it up. So we have to get close to a max distance of 3 in order to pick up the item. So now that we've configured the item, we need to go to our VR inventory game object, and I'm going to unlock this. And the VR inventory script needs a database. So that is, of course, the database that we've created here, and we've added the sword into that. So I'm going to add that here, and now our VR inventory is set up. Now, in order to add that object into the scene, we would add a 3D model, but I'll just use a cube for now. And let me put it at 0, 0, 0. And just to get a floor in here, let me put a plane. Alright, so this cube represents our sword item. And so I'm going to change its size a little bit. So there's the sword. And we need to tell the inventory system that this is a sword item that can pick up. So we're going to add a component called inventory item. So type item and just say inventory item. The first thing you have to do is grab that database again. And so from that database, we can select what item this is. And of course, we've only made one item. That's the small sword. So I'm going to select small sword. And the quantity is 1. And again, if this was the gold, we would say 5. Because when we pick up a stack of 5 coins, we're going to get 5 into the inventory. But with the sword, it's just 1. And now we should be able to pick that up. So just to make sure, let me follow along with the documentation. It says you need to add the inventory item.cs script to it, and then you need to populate the database and what item it is. And then after that, we just need to respond to the events. So I should be able to pick this up if I look at it. And everything's white, so that makes it really hard. But okay, here it is. And I can see the ring has expanded, so I'm going to click on that. And it's gone into my inventory, so now I can see that I do have a small sword in my inventory. And if I look, there it is, and we have it in the inventory. Now, the next part that I'm not going to cover in detail in this tutorial is responding to events. And what we will do for that is we will reference the demo scene, because it's pretty complicated, and it does require some C# scripting. So first of all, let's click the demo and go to the inventory demo scene. And in here we'll look in here at how the events are set up to work. So responding to the events, there's 2 events that it currently responds to: when an item is picked up from the world, and when an item is clicked on in the inventory UI. So you can assign custom functions for these in the VR inventory inspector. So if you go here, on item selected, you could put a function that runs when an item is selected in the inventory, and on item picked up, a function that is run when you pick up an item from the world. So there's an example of how this is set up. The demo doesn't use this, but you can put the on item test script, on item selected, test script, on item picked up. You can see how those functions are set up here, and it's just going to debug.log the stack item name. And when you pick an item up, it's going to debug.log the result item name. So you can see there in this documentation how you can use these events to respond to when an item is selected or when an item is picked up. And what it's going to do is it's going to debug.log the name of that item in both cases. So then the next part is adding listeners for the events, and that's how the demo works. So the included demo shows how to add listeners in the script VR inventory example scene controller. And to find that, you would go here to the demo scene, VR inventory example scene controller. And you're going to see that in this script, at start, it adds the listener. So here we go, VR inventory, on item selected, add listener. And on item picked up, add listener. And it calls this function when that happens in this function when you pick up an item. So you can see that this function is run when an item is selected, and this function is run when an item is picked up. So that is how 2 different ways that you can respond to events. One, you could set up the events in the inspector like this, or you can just add listeners which are going to respond to those events. The next part is using equippable items. The sword, for example, when you pick this up, you use it because it has a sword.cs script. Now this in the scene, it doesn't have sword.cs. And the reason why is because when an equippable item is instantiated via prefab. So this prefab right here is the one that actually goes into that goes into your hand when you equip the item. And you're going to see that this one has a script on it called sword. And so let's open up that script. And we can see, follow along with the documentation, that first we have to extend the equippable inventory item base class. So here it is, the sword equippable inventory item base. And then from there's 3 events that are useful: on item equip, on item unequipped, and on item used. So in the demo, the equipping the sword gives a UI notification, and we can see that here. And then when you use the item, it goes ahead and swings the sword. This script just swings the sword, but it shows you how to use the equipable items and how to extend that class so you can use your own equipable items. Alright, the next part is the useful functions from the VR inventory class. So at any time you can call these functions add item, and add item is going to return an e-pickup result. The e-pickup result is, the reason for that is because it may not be successful. If the player has 20 health potions and 20 is the max, one stack size, so you can't pick up 21 potions, then the e-pickup result may be a failure because the player didn't pick up anything. So when you add an item, it may not always add an item. So that's why it returns the e-pickup result. And then there is remove item. You can remove items from the inventory. You can have a bool to check to see if the inventory has an item. You can say get item quantity. So this could, for example, check how much gold the player has. And then there's a save and a load function that lets you save the inventory and then load it again, of course, when your game is starting. So that brings us to an end of the documentation, and perhaps in a future tutorial we'll get more into depth on how to do these responding to events. Perhaps I'll show how to do this, but I think this is a really good example. It's very straightforward. I could go type this out, but really the documentation covers that well. So anyways, look through the demo scene to see how everything is working. If you have more questions about how that's working. And thanks for watching the video. Stay tuned for more. Remember to give it a like, subscribe, and keep developing awesome VR stuff. See you guys soon.